Okay, to do the crank sensor, I moved it over the other side of the garage. I used my Cherokee one here to pull it back, swap sides. I just got done doing the crank sensor, and I'm telling you, this is one hard vehicle to do a crank sensor on, because it's way down here on the top of the bell housing. You can see the, I don't even know if I can get in there. See down in there that black harness? That harness and that bolt, and that harness is going. I actually took it up over my main shifter cable to take it around on the passenger side to reach the plug. That is a bear of a puppy to get out and to replace, to get the new one in, especially since this one I have the transmission dipstick tube here on this side. I pulled the dipstick out and I went ahead and put my big long pry bar against the vacuum housing, brake master housing, and I bowed up the tube a little bit, because with that thing right here, there's no way I could get my hand down in there, and you can't reach it from underneath. And I'm a big guy with long arms, and thank God I don't got huge Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger arms. I got long, big arms that are kind of skinny, but I can fit in most places where a lot of guys can't. So I was able to, the old one came out pretty darn hard. I used my pry bar underneath to lift it out once I got the bolt out. And this basically is what you got to have to get the bolt out. You got to extend out like this, like nearly 42 inches, 40 inches or so, with a bunch of extensions. It's 12 millimeter. And you got to get the thing up in the air. So, see, I've got him up in the air, and I did change hoods. I just looked at the one that was off Hippo. It was just a much better hood. This one looks so much nicer, and it's straight. The top skin is in proper shape, so I swapped it. And don't ever jack up your vehicle without putting stands underneath it. Don't ever get underneath a vehicle without stands underneath it. To get that crank sensor pulled out and the new one put in. Now, I've gotten in a habit. I was talking to a diesel expert when I was rebuilding my semi-truck engine, and he recommended Vaseline on a lot of press-in and O-ring sealing kind of surfaces and stuff. So really, for the last few years, I've been using a little bit of Vaseline, a thin film, because Vaseline will dissipate to gasoline. It will dissipate to most other petroleum fluids, so it doesn't hurt anything but lubricate it. So I gave a thin film of Vaseline around this new crank sensor that came out of Hippo, because he was dirty. But it slid out of Hippo a lot better than the broken pieces left of this one slid out of Burn Victim. This is the one I took out. And I don't think it's ever been changed based on the amount of crap that was here. It's been in there a long time. You know, it's funny because I found this piece of wire just hanging out up there on top of the bell housing, and I had to reach in there with my spring claw to grab it. I'm like, what the heck is that? Oh yeah, it's the piece of the cabling to the, the crank sensor there that came out. So that's going on the rubbish pile to head out to the junk. So put a little bit of Vaseline around it. It's 12 millimeter. You've got to go from way down, dang near pretty much at the transfer case, shifter bracketing and all that fit around it with that much extensions. Put the bolt already in there. In fact, I had to reach from underneath with my long screwdriver to seat it down in all the way, because my hole for the mount on the sensor itself was still above. It wasn't seated all the way in. The sensor was not down in the hole all the way. And I pushed on the top side from underneath and was able to use my long, I have like a 20-inch plus screwdriver, and push on it, and it seated down in there. Then I knew I could put the bolt into the socket. And you could, I used a deep socket. A shallow 12 millimeter might work, maybe even better. Bolt stayed in there good enough for me to fish it up in there and get it started and put that bolt in. Not an easy thing to do. And I got the valance all cleaned up. The other day I treated it with some WD-40 rub downs and everything. Now the thing about the valance, there's something unique about that as well. Bring my light back up here and remount to light up the engine bay. The whole wiper mechanism underneath has bushings, rubber bushings, and inside that bushing it's got, the steel collar, the metal collar. So there is no slide adjustments for that. The mechanical moving mechanism, arms of everything, of the wiper system is going to bolt in one place. I think they generalize putting in these valances for where the holes are going to be. Because one of my other ZJs, I don't remember which one it was, because they give you a big hole underneath. So that could make this valance move around quite a bit. Well, your outside body of your wiper blade can cut grooves and rub on this inside. It also makes it dang hard to get the wiper blade, the wiper arms off. And so I centered this. I looked at the hole underneath and I centered it right over both the wiper mounts to put the valance on, and I was not mating up with these, you know, top holes. There's one over here, one here, and there's one here, and one there, and then one all the way over there. So yeah, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6 of them. I was not mating with the old holes. When I tried to mate with the old holes, push it way over, I was jammed against this right here. So I went ahead, aligned this, held it, re-snapped back down the rubber seal, the valance to the metal ledge, because the hood gasket is what holds that down here. And I re-drilled new holes down here. Well, I think a 7/64 bit, go a little bit smaller, an 1/8 inch, because these are like just about 1/8 inch bolts. So you want them to grab new teeth. You want them to have some bite to them when they go in. I haven't hooked up the squirter hose yet, and I'm not going to put the wiper arms yet because I am going to get a new windshield put in. First, I want to start this thing and run it. I've still got to clean this window. It's real nasty. I did a quick swipe on the passenger side, oh heck, a month ago or so. But yeah, I'm going to get this cracked window out of here and get a new one replaced. But order number 1 is to see this puppy run. I'm really close. And I can start it without a brake master cylinder. I'm going to have to borrow the battery. I don't think jumper cables, the teeth will be able to pass enough amperage to crank the starter. They're good enough for jumping, but to from one battery to another gives another, a battery in a car enough extra bump to get it started. But I think I've tried before trying to run off an external battery sitting on the ground, with just jumper cables grabbed onto these, and the teeth themselves will just arc. They can't quite pass enough. Now maybe it would work. I don't know. I haven't tried it, so I might be a liar right now, but I think I've done it before, probably 20 dang years ago, and learned that you actually do have to put a battery post to these to be able to pass enough current for it to engage and start. So I got the fuel line fixed. That's fixed. There's coolant in it now. I've checked the training fluid oil. They're good. Once I've got this running, all that's going to get changed. I'm going to tighten the transmission bands because these older trannies have band adjustments you can do. In fact, that's all it really took to get Ellie's transmission working. We bought that for $700 on the premise. The gal thought the tranny was going out because it was having problems. But all I did was come home, flush the fluid, change it. After I had the pan off, I went through the band adjustments. There's clips on YouTube you guys can look up to know how to do that. Maybe one day I'll make another video when I do this one. I'll make my own video of doing it too. So I've moved the fuel pump relay back to the pump relay off the fog lamp area. So this Jeep doesn't have fog lamps. And I'm about ready to start it. I'm hoping to start it today. Now one thing I did do is took the bumper cover and pushed it up on here. And oddly enough, I seem to bump into these things. I think it's got to go higher because I think it has to go in between. I did make little notches in my bumper cover on the black one over there when I had its bumper off and redid it. And this baby's almost all ready to go. As soon as I get things hooked up here, I'm going to see if I can get her started. We'll make another video. Okay, first time cranking. Borrowed my black Jeep's battery and put it in here. This is actually one of the batteries out of my Ram, so this really is too big of a battery. That's why it's up against the hose. I haven't actually bought the proper size yet for even Cherokee 2. I've been running this battery for a year. So cranking it, hallelujah, it cranked. So the harness is good. That's good to know. But it wouldn't start. And then I noticed fuel coming out of the fuel pressure check port for putting your gauge on and checking your fuel pressure on the fuel rail. So I'm like, oh yeah, seems like all the rubber fittings, everything rubber got destroyed. So the Schrader valve stem in here is rubber, had to have been shot because it was dripping off of this. So I had to, throw one of my old socks under there and start catching the of fuel. Okay, so I resolved that. I ran out to Hippo, who's now actually gotten snowed on, sitting out there. Lifted the hood and took the Schrader valve out of it. And yeah, you can see how this one has no angle to it. It's almost a smooth, flat. Now this one has a brown seal to it. The one I took out of Hippo has a blue seal, and it has a little bit of a flare to it. So I could tell it's good. This one was bad. So I changed, put in this valve stem, Schrader valve, and it took some cranking to build the pressure back up, but the puppy started. Oh, I was so excited, but it was barely running. Okay, now I had my timing mark down there. I had rotated the engine to have my timing mark on. I don't know if I can even zoom on this, but you can see just a slight groove right there on the flywheel. If I get the angle right, I am set at 0 degrees. And when I rotated it around, I took the cap off, because the problem with, like, I've done this on my Chevy engines a ton of times, if you crank the thing and you have your distributor out, your drive little flat in the bottom is not getting turned. That's your oil pump. If you crank the engine with the distributor out, because the distributor turns the oil pump off the cam gear. So I marked the distributor when the cap is on, because this is keyed. Let me zoom back out. Okay, so these are keyed. The cap only goes on one way. On one side, they're a little bit closer than the other side, so the cap only goes on one way. You can only put this on one way. So I went ahead and marked number 1. Make sure I got the rotor. Okay, so I marked all my wires, because I don't have to go look it up. I know, V8s off the top of my head, 1843657 but this I wasn't sure about. This is my first 4.0 liter. So I marked them. I also marked the body right here where number 1 is pointing at. Now I've got it pointed at number 1. What you have to do is you have to take out the distributor, and because it's going to rotate this rotor, it's going to rotate as you're lifting it out past those worm gears. You have to get in there with a long flat screwdriver. So I put this way down in there with my light, a big long flat screwdriver. This thing's like 20 inches long or so. And I rotated back, because when I first pulled this cap off, my number 1 location for firing was over here at 5. That's why it was barely running. Barely running, but it ran. That told me my cam sensor's good, crank sensor's good, everything. I was very happy about that. It ran great, but it wouldn't rev, wouldn't do anything. It was barely running. So when I pulled the cap off, I realized, oh yeah, I'm off a tooth. So I rotated the oil pump, and this, I already put the clamp in, but the bottom base of these engines' distributor is already cut to fit around the shaft of the bolt. There is no adjusting timing on these. Like old cars, I could turn the distributor to change the timing. So you have to get the oil pump drive slot keyed just right with the worm gear when you're sliding down in the distributor, and this rotor is rotating down in, that it seats all the way. It seats all the way to be able to, put your bolt down, and the base of the distributor U is seated to the engine block, and then you can put your bolt in. So it takes some fiddling. It took me 2-3 rotations before I got it right of the oil pump drive. Before sliding down in, I was seated all the way to the block. So I put the bolt in. It's seated now, and I'm on number 1, and I'm on 0 degrees on the timing. This should work now. I can't reassemble all this and put it back together. So I saved myself effort. Yeah, I marked everything I could see. So there's number 1. It's 1, 5, 3, 6. What is that? I can't see this. Let's see. That's 2, and then 4. 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4. That's got to be the timing, because that's how I took it off. This is a bone stock distributor with the wires, spark wires that were already on it from Hippo. And I do have another set of rotor and wires and stuff. But I want to see this thing. I was going to return those if I didn't need them, and this thing ended up just being a lost cause. if the engine was bad. I didn't think so, because just a engine fire certainly shouldn't destroy an engine internals. This dead guy cap just right. There we go. It will seat just right. When you get it in there right, you'll feel it. It'll seat. I'm gonna run the screws in. I'm gonna put the phone down. I'm gonna come back and see we got this baby running.